Welcome everyone. Thank you so very much for being here. The last day of school, such troopers, to continue our journey as we cover all of these very important topics to support our students. And so I'm going to just take the floor for a tiny bit. I'm going to share with you guys on the EL website. If you don't have access to that yet, we recommend that you actually I'll put it on the chat box right now. But it's this EL website. We have this whole entire webpage, the one tab dedicated to professional development. And so within this professional development, we have 3 different modules that are from the Brain Friendly conference from Kagan. If you're familiar with Kagan, and I believe some of us, maybe Cynthia, you probably attended the Brain conference, right? The Kagan. The multiple day Kagan? No? Okay, cool. Well, all of this comes from Kagan. Kagan is just a PD conference that they put together to get the kids like moving and learning at the same time. And so it's broken into 3 topics. The first one is nourishing the brain, and it talks about, and it is progressive. It goes in this way because before you get the kids, you have to make sure, the idea is that we have to make sure that we get the kids, their brains going and well nourished, and we go to the very basics of making sure that they're hydrated and that they've eaten well, and just the physiological needs of our brain in order to get them ready to learn. So that's the first module. I'm not going to go through it all because Tina is actually going to be covering a lot of this in what she has prepared for you guys in a minute. But it's pretty self-explanatory. So, and it's only about 8 to 10 slides per, but it's very interactive. So the first module is all about getting the brain ready, physically ready for it. The second module is fostering a safe classroom. Allowing, if Tina, if you can go to like the first slide, let's see, the first, go back. All of them have, okay, so all of them have like basic pillars of it. And so this one right here, fostering safe classroom, is all about making sure that the brain feels safe to learn. So what are some threads that in safety nets that our brain feels, and how we can ensure that our students are feeling safe. And all of them start with kind of like the brain nerdy, like the nerdy geeking, like geeking out on what's happening in the brain. And then it goes to what's happening in the context of classroom and home. And then what can we do to ensure that the students, that we optimize the brain function. And so these are some examples here: home life, what they can do, and school. And then the last one, the last module, there's more modules, but you'll see that they kind of repeat themselves. And so that's why we stopped at module 3. But module 3 is kind of putting it all together. So, okay, now that you've nourished the brain and that the brain feels safe, now let's see how we can effectively leverage on the fact that our brain is a social muscle, and there's this need to not learn independently, but learn together, but in a safe way. And so this third module walks you through it. So Tina, if you can just go through a couple. So again, it geeks out on everything that's happening in the brain, and then it gives you some like a little toolkit as to how we can leverage from the fact that our brain is a social, we are social beings, and how we can learn from it. So all of those, again, very self-explanatory, super highly suggest that we, that you look at those. I'm actually going to drop them in one of the slides that Tina has shared with you guys in this slide right here, so that you guys can have them at your fingertips if you wanted to go back and check them out. But for now, Tina, over to you, chica.
All righty. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started on, like Adriana mentioned, with the 3 brain modules. This that I'm going to be sharing with you today has little pieces of each of them all combined into one. And so then, and I'll share a few strategies as well to consider for your students. So we're going to go ahead and get started on Module 9. So talking about geeking out, I am going to geek out a little bit on some of this information, but I think it's important for you to understand how the brain works. And it's so funny because we've been to several brain conferences, and it's like I can hear this information over and over from all of these like neuroscientists, like super brain nerds. But it takes quite a few times of listening to the information for it to finally click. And the same thing happens for our kids as well. But so finally, this last one that I attended, it just all clicked for me. So I'm gonna explain to you my understanding, Dr. Ankasawan's understanding of the brain in the most simplest way that I can, because it's the only way that I can understand it. So what you're looking at right here, this is your brain without high stress. So you can see just the visual of, there's 3 arrows that you're looking at right here. I'm starting from, and I don't know if you can see my mouse at all moving around the screen, but information always starts here from the brain stem. So the correct way for students to learn information in order for it to get to our long-term memory is it goes through here. Okay, the information goes through here, which is the reactive area, the amygdala right here. This little, I don't know if you can see it, it's like a dark gray here. The amygdala is like a switch. It's an emotional switch in our brain. And when learning something, that switch can take us to a positive journey, or it can take us to a not so positive journey when we're learning. If it takes us in the positive journey, then the information the synapses will continue along through, passing through the brain, and will reach this area right here, which is called the prefrontal cortex. And this is the reflective area where the judgment comes in, making good decisions, long-term memory. That's the area that we always want the information to go for our students. We want it to reach the prefrontal cortex. So what happens, and again, this is the amygdala, that emotional switch. This is what it's supposed to look like when it's not under stress. But when it's under stress, it just looks like a huge blockade. Okay, so like a big red stop sign here. So this is what happens when the brain is under high stress. The amygdala is just it gets enlarged. And then it at this point is when students have a certain decision that they need to make, okay? So what happens here, what's causing this amygdala to get large is the increased oxygen and glucose that's being released. So when you're stressed, there's an increase of oxygen and glucose, and that creates a blockade in the synapses. Okay, so what happens when we create that blockade because of some type of stress is we get into this reaction. So it's the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. So this is what it looks like in animals, in Scooby-Doo, right? So anytime we make decisions, it's literally that amygdala in the middle of our brain, that it's a switch. So either we have a positive reaction or we have a negative reaction. And so negative reactions would be when we have to protect ourselves, and it's for survival, right? So when we are reacting to fight, flight, or freeze, this is what it looks like in our students. And so I'm going to share an example, something that literally just happened yesterday with my daughter. So when students are under stress, their fight is what they're doing when they're acting out, okay? And when they freeze, it's basically when you see them zoned out, they're in that freeze reactive stage, right? If they stop attending school, we know that's the flight. But for my own daughter, for example, she was doing her AP test yesterday. Number one thing is time, stress, right? So if your students are taking a test and it's under time, it happens for me as well. Just knowing that that clock is ticking away is a huge stressor. It will automatically create a blockade in our brain. But if we teach our students self-regulation, techniques for self-regulation, then when it gets to that amygdala and they have to make that decision of either fight, flight, freeze, or move on and I'm going to endure and I'm going to reach the goal that I'm trying to reach, then they need to understand the certain techniques, okay, certain techniques for them. But what happened for my daughter yesterday is that since the time was stressing her out, she literally, she did not submit her AP exam on time. Because there's a process for submitting your work. And she's already had an AP exam before and went through the process, but because it was coming closer to the time for her to submit it, she got in this heightened state of just stress, and she literally froze, literally couldn't think of, what am I supposed to, like, I have to turn this into a PDF, and just not able to move. She literally froze, and all she could do was come to me and say, Mom, I didn't turn it in on time. I need your help, because the email popped up saying we could still let you submit it. So I ran over there and we did our thing, and you know, when we're praying that everything will be okay and she won't have to retake it. But anyway, prime example right there of freezing when you just can't think of what you're supposed to do. And and this is partly something that I need to work on too, is those techniques for when you know you're stressed, you need to slow down. As hard as it is, you need to slow down, and you need to make sure that you follow certain techniques that will work for you. And each student's techniques may be different, what works for them. Just so we'll talk about some of those strategies as well. So these are learning experiences associated with stress. So there's two things that can cause stress when we're thinking about the classroom. Number one is when students are bored out of their minds. And number two, when students are frustrated. And like my daughter, she was experiencing some frustration yesterday. Boredom. Students are bored when they're learning something that they already know. Students are bored when they're continuing to hear some information that they've already mastered. That right there can trigger that fight, flight, or freeze. Just that alone, just being bored. If the content that you're teaching is not connected to them in any way, or you're not providing the opportunities for the students to make connections, that will be another thing that causes boredom, which fight, flight, or freeze, right? Frustration can occur if something is at a level that is too hard for them to understand. So I know, like for AR, for example, they have the ZPD, the zone of proximal development, and that zone of proximal development has everything to do with making sure that the students are being taught at a level that's not too boring for them, because it'll give them some level of, I still need to learn something, but also not too high above where they need to be, but enough for them to be challenged. And so we always wanting to consider reaching our students in that ZPD level in order to avoid any frustration with our students. These are three things to keep in mind in order to nurture the brain to reach that reflective prefrontal cortex part of the brain. So this is where we want our students, the journey we want our students to follow. And so if we can ensure that the climate is safe, comfortable, culturally responsive to our students, and that they just feel comfortable in their classroom environment, that will assist in the journey. allowing our students to practice, to first of all, teaching our students certain techniques for self-regulation and allowing them to practice them in time of need in the classroom is also something that will nurture that learning journey. And then just being, including instructional strategies that will engage the students and making sure that it's within that ZPD that I was just talking about. So number one, being mentally aware, being self-aware when your students are under stress. They first need to recognize it, okay? Recognize, why are they blocked right now? And it's probably because they're stressed. Something is stressing them out. So we want to make sure that our students, and bring it up to our students when you see this happening, let them know, okay, I see that you feel some sort of stress right now. Okay, let's think, what can we do in order to move on? And so this is when you can teach the techniques that we'll talk about. And so when the students know that they're in control of their learning, even if they are facing a stressful moment, with that awareness and the tools in hand, they still will be able to achieve that learning journey without really reaching that blockade, that complete blockade. They'll get there. They're all going to get to that block. But if they use those strategies, then it'll continue the way we want them to go. So here, these are some of the techniques that I was sharing with you that would be helpful for your students to know about and to practice. And there's tons more out there, and I know that, what's the name of that workout video, brain break?
Go Noodle?
Thank you. Go Noodle. Go Noodle has a lot of videos to practice these things. So thank you for reminding me on that one. But yeah, so having the students visualize just a calming memory, like they're at vacation, they're in Hawaii or whatever, and just getting them to think positively, basically, and visualize positively will reduce the amount of stress. Having them breathe slowly, using an imaginary bubble. So if there's certain things that they keep hearing, even if it's from their peers, and they keep hearing something about their efforts towards doing something that they might get annoyed with, if they literally visualize a bubble around them that's blocking all of the negativity and the bad stuff around them, that's something that could help as well. And then something as simple as just breathing deeply and counting to 10. And I know we were sitting in this family engagement workshop yesterday or the day before, and this gentleman was sharing about, square breathing, and like breathing in, holding it, breathing out, holding it, literally just 4 square of breathing. And when I was doing it, oh my gosh, I really felt like a sense of calming, clarity. And that's something visually that everybody can do in the classroom, just a strategy. Like, okay, you can sense it in your students. You're teaching a new strategy or a new, the area model or something in math, and you have this heightened sense of stress in your class. Taking that moment, that's why those brain breaks, those Go Noodles are very important to nurture the calm environment that will allow the students to think and be able to reflect and connect and be able to remain in our long term. Mm-hmm.
Something I wanted to mention to you guys is if and when you take a look at the other modules as well, one of the slides will also share not only the work that they're looking at, but also like a certain way that we look at kids, or even a voice. Like if we raise our voice for whatever reason, that already it triggers a little bit of a flight or fight or flight, a reaction for students. And so being very cognizant of that, because our body language or the way, our face, all of that matters to our students. And so if anything, let's just say we're sitting here and and I just make a comment towards Gisela or Bertha or Crystal, one of them, and then it's something that right there, let's think about the fact, if I made like a smarty comment or a sarcastic comment towards one of you, that right there probably would just trigger you to be thinking about that all this moment. And anything Tina's talking about right now is probably just going to go over your head, because you're thinking about that one way I looked at you, or that one thing I said, or the way I'm just looking angry or upset at you. Those kinds of things are very subtle ways of our brain reacting and all of this happening that Tina's saying.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. And, you know, I wanted to mention too, while you were talking, I had a thought. We do have these self-regulation cards that we did at a family engagement event last year or a couple of years ago. They're both in English and in Spanish, as well as like the morning meeting type of reflection cards and morning meeting type of questions that will help with the dialogue, you know, encouraging the dialogue in your classroom for students to feel safe, and also to be able to understand what each student needs to do when they're under stress. You know, what works for you, and just hearing that we all go through this, and so it's just a matter of feeling comfortable to be able to do these things when we are in times of stress. But when I link this video, I'll also link the resources of those. Basically, you can use them as morning meeting cards. Yeah, and Adriana's holding those up too, right there.
So I use them with my kids here, guys, and they're teenagers, and we go through one of them. It's even great for conversation. Right now, in the very heavy moments that we're having, there's some great little stems that you can start conversations around, and they've been created for all ages, and then you can just kind of, it's great. You can personalize for your kids.
Mm-hmm. It's just that now Zoom. Oh, go ahead, Bertha. You have something.
Oh, I wanted to ask. I missed what those were called.
These, I think we call them self-regulation cards. I can't remember 100% off the top of my head, but I will definitely, they're self-regulation questions, routines, and strategies. And so I'll link it though. I'll link it when I link the video. I'll link it to the DLI PD Module doc as an added resource next to the YouTube link.
Mm-hmm. And if you guys are interested in printing them like this, because we printed them in like really nice, heavy cardstock glossy, let us know, because we can send them off for you guys if you'd like.
And I think, Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, I think when we organized our shelves and stuff at LAC, I think we had some extra in a drawer, didn't we? Where the supplies are that we might already have on hand.
I think
okay.
So. Yeah, I think we do.
Okay, so cool. We may have enough even for you guys. All right. Okay, so, and this is just wanted to remind you, I think I already mentioned this, but even when that amygdala is experiencing the heightened sense of stress, that it's not a lost cause. We still, students are still able to activate that the learning. If they can activate the self-awareness strategies, then they will still be able to learn what they're trying to learn, whatever their goal is. So it's top down. So it's like more of a responsive, right? This has already happened. We're stressed. And so in order to kind of talk our way down and work our synapses a little bit to a more calming zone where we can actually think straight, just utilizing the strategies is still something that will be able to help our students. And then this one right here is just to remind you and the students, and I don't even know if the students know this or not, but our brain reacts to certain things, pleasure and patterns. And so it's just programmed to react to pleasure and patterns. And so pleasure and patterns can guide the way that we think as well. And if students are pleased about what they're learning and they get a sense of getting a reward for what they're learning along the way, then they're more likely to continue that learning journey with the effort that we're wanting them to give towards a specific topic. So when thinking about designing lessons for the students that is going to assist with them having that heightened sense of alertness, awareness, and effort, we want to think about this chemical in our brain that gets released. And this chemical in our brain is called dopamine. And this is something that basically rewards the student, okay, along the way. And there's certain things that our brain responds to that allows that dopamine to be released. When the dopamine is released, it affects things like, as mentioned, pleasure, attention. We can have a longer attention span towards something if we have that dopamine being released throughout. More motivated, students are more willing to persevere, and information will go to long-term memory. Some of the things that you can incorporate when you're designing your lessons, again, these are considered sometimes brain breaks, and sometimes just not even a brain break that they realize, where it's like you're stopping learning, but it may be things that you incorporate and embed during learning. Because I know time is of the essence, and sometimes it's like, even myself, I would do the Go Noodle and I'd be like, oh my God, I don't have time for Go Noodle. I have to get this, and this done. So these are just some of the things that you can do that also releases the dopamine, which would be considered a brain break, but still moving on. Things like incorporating music into your lessons, or while they're working, telling them stories. And all of these things also help with engagement as well. So dopamine's released, they're engaged, the more engaged they are, the more chemical of that dopamine that's being released, and they're gonna stay with you. Allowing them to interact with their peers, be able to collaborate with each other. So, you know, that whole 10-2 idea, talk for 10 minutes, then let them process for 2 minutes. But they can process for, you know, with each other for 2 minutes, and there's that whole interacting with peers piece as well. Moving, so the total physical response type of movement, learning things with gestures, and we know that that's all whole brain based teaching and proven to allow our students to learn the information better and easier. Allowing students choice. We've done a lot about choice boards and all of that, but choice is so super important. And then just other things like social emotional things, just being optimistic, kind, showing gratitude. And two of the highest levels of dopamine releasers have something to do with making two things. One is making predictions, and the other one is learning through achieving challenges. And I'm talking about achieving little challenges along the way. And when I saw this little achieving challenges, in my mind, I'm thinking about the skill progressions. So you have a goal in mind. That's your target. But there's certain success criteria that we always share, right, with our students. So this is what we want you to learn. But in order to do this, you have to first be able to do A, B, and C. And so as you're learning and teaching that unit, make sure you're making the students aware of the fact that, hey, you know what, you guys, today, you just succeeded success criteria number 1. You're getting closer to leveling up. And just the idea of leveling up is something that achieving challenges is something that releases a lot of dopamine in the brain. And the reason why it works so well, and we know this, is because it's exactly how video games are done, right? Students can be on video games all day long. And so it's because the video game developers had a couple of things in mind: pleasure and patterns and achievement, the little achievement boosters along the way. Think about gambling, right? Gambling is another one that's why are people so intrigued with playing poker? Well, they're earning something, they're earning money, but it's also by chance, right? It's not 100% they're going to win the hand, but there's a chance that they can win the hand. So just the idea of patterns and guessing or predicting what could be next is something that affects our brain and learning. So the video game model, these are the three things that we need to keep in mind. And I'm sharing these three things because, as I mentioned before, it's something you can use when you're designing your lessons. So they need to, first of all, buy into the goal. You need to engage them. You need to hook them. And it needs to be something that's relevant to them, that they're going to make some sort of connection with, so that they stick with you. Predictions, like I mentioned before, they could have an idea of where they're going, but just not 100% knowing the outcome is something that's going to intrigue them to want to stick with you. And then being able to achieve challenges along the way, and then the feedback. So, you know, with gambling, the feedback is, here's your money. But when you're in the classroom, the feedback, it could look a lot of different ways. And we're just talking about this earlier today, but it could look a lot of different ways. You know, some students respond to feedback as just like a little Bitmoji, a little sticker, or you put a stamp on the paper and they feel good about it. Some students need a little bit more different forms of feedback, where it's like they need that conversation, you know, that constructive feedback that will help them level up. And so feedback could look a lot of different ways for a lot of different students. It's whatever your students respond to, and you're going to know them, you know, best what they respond to. So I wanted to share with you a strategy that that offers these three things. So it will offer the little achievements along the way, and the feedback, and then buying into a goal. So this strategy is for highlighting. It's highlighting for comprehension and progress feedback. So you're going to give your students a little article or an excerpt from an article or a novel or something. And again, remembering that this is going to be an article that is going to be within their ZPD. Not too easy for them, not too hard for them, but just right? The whole, what is it, Goldilocks? It has to be just right. That's what we're looking for when you're thinking about an article for your students. What they would do, and I'm gonna show you just a quick example of this, but just want to explain first. You would have the students underline the parts of the reading that they already know and feel comfortable with. Like, it's just not a question in their mind. Their first read, they're going to read that little excerpt 3 times. The first time, they're going to highlight with yellow, okay, all the things that they already know and feel comfortable with. The second time they read it is going to be in a blue highlighter, for example. The idea behind this is they're going to realize whatever is left over, they may end up the second read understanding it now. So they had the first run through, but the second read, they might be like, oh, okay, well, I already know all of this. So I'm really going to concentrate on what's not highlighted and see what of that do I actually think I probably know, and then highlight that in blue. And then the third time, they highlight this in green. And what that's doing is they're giving themselves feedback, number one, because when they start to see it through the progression of the routine, they'll start to realize, wow, I am getting better. And it's also showing the importance of and the benefit of reading something more than once. So I'm going to show you an example. So this is a little piece of an article about the brain. And again, brain information is not easy to comprehend, right? There's a lot of academic vocabulary in here that may be very confusing for people. But again, it's something that we could probably figure out, us as adults, if we're looking at this article about the brain. But again, the first time we're going to read this, we're going to highlight the things that we already understand. Okay, left and right brain thinking. We already know information about left brain and right brain. We can understand what the left brain does there. It's the creative and artistic mind. And we also, it's easy to understand a statement that says everything in this claim is wrong. So, okay, I get that. So we highlight that in yellow. The second time we read it, we're going to highlight the things that we think that we know again. And so this would be, okay, the brain dominance. We can understand that what, you know, brain dominance meaning that something is stronger. And then neuromyth is based on clinical research. So we may not have known what neuromyth is, but we know that it's based on research. So, okay, I can understand that something is based on research. And so that would be like an example of the second read. Then by the time the third read is done, we highlight some other information that we know, and we're still going to be left with things that we don't understand in this article. And then that could be the things that we focus on. So there's going to be words like corpus callosum. I mean, I don't know what that is, and that the fact that it could be severed. Okay, so that could be like a teachable moment. Let's talk about corpus callosum, because a lot of you did not highlight the corpus callosum. Intact corpus callosum, you know. So whatever your little teachable moments would be in there, but this strategy provides individualized feedback of the progress, aka those little success criteria along the way, reaching those little goals along the way. So they're able to see for themselves that they're making a progression with doing a strategy like this. And like I mentioned before, also just showing them and proving to them that being able to reread something is a valuable experience, because they're going to be able to, first time it may be confusing, but the more often or the more they read it, the deeper the understanding is. I mean, it happens with me too. Sometimes I have to reread something 2 or 3 times before I actually finally understand it. But this is just a way to also give a little bit of that, ooh, look, all of this that I have highlighted, that means I know a lot. And it's like a kudos for them, and which would be their sense of feedback. So,
Another idea on the flip side, you were able to highlight pretty much everything in the article, but what would happen with those kiddos who are not able, even by the third read, they're just highlighting very little. That right there is feedback for them and for you as well, to say, okay, this text is too high for the student. They're not understanding, or not the text, but maybe the topic, the concepts, and that's a good moment for us to see, okay, we need to go back and teach the basics or cover the basics of this, because there's absolutely no background knowledge or information around this topic. And so that, and the other piece I was thinking too is what a great way for them. I know, Tina, you've already mentioned, but just like chipping away at success that way. And that's why this is very similar to video games. I see my kids playing, and it's just like, it's honestly so boring to me to see it so slow, but they can be there for hours. Why? Because they're having those small, like I was watching my son yesterday, and he just was able to figure out how to climb the mountain, and woohoo, that's like his success for like 2-3 more minutes. And then the next little gain and the next gain. And I'm like, bruh, I don't even know. Like, this is too much hours to be sitting here to climb the darn mountain.
and you know what's so crazy to watch too, because I was just my son actually just borrowed a video game from her son, and I'm over here watching him play this game, and there are different levels, and sure enough, like this dude will die, and then he'll play again, and he'll die, and he'll play, and he won't pass it, right? But he's persevering, and he's sticking with it, and he's like constantly like, I'm gotta level up, you know? And it's like, if we could figure out a way to show and make it a thing when they level up, how much more effort and perseverance these kids would put towards it, because all that dopamine is being released, and it's just like, you know, I have to level up. It becomes their drug, is just leveling up, you know.
Pointing out the ways in which they can appreciate the small little gains. You know, sometimes we want to go from an F to an A, or from not being able to read this text to like reading and understanding everything and getting 100%. And it's just teaching the kiddos how to appreciate little by little. And that's why I love that Tina keeps on bringing the leveling up. It's not going surpassing 4-letter grades. It's just, or understanding the whole thing. It's little by little, but really pointing it out to our students that that's important to them, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so that concludes module 9. Is there anything that you guys would like to share in regards to maybe some ideas that you might have that could help help your students respond to the brain needs of the things that you've heard today so far?
I think my screen is frozen. I don't know. It looks, oh gosh. Yeah, that's great. But I did want to bring up, there's this site that I've been trying to learn how to use. They have some webinars right now. I just haven't had a chance to do them, but it's called Classcraft. And apparently it's something, it's like a platform for game-based learning, but you put in all of the work, you create the goals, learning goals, and all of that. It's pretty tailored, but it guides them through that. I just heard about it. I was wondering if anybody knew anything about this.
You know what? It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm pretty sure there are some teachers at LaSalle that have done it. This is something that I've seen at Q in regards to behavior. So I would have to check with them if they are using it for more like learning goals or not. But that would be very interesting to hear from them. But I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I think it costs a lot of money.
Oh, is it? Okay.
We'll have to look into it, but I remember, I want to say about 3 years ago, I was at Q and I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And this was when we first started the whole PBIS thing. And I thought, oh, well, this might be a way, you know, to reward students that are following the skills, behavior skills. So I know they were using it for that. And again, a lot happens in 3 years time, and maybe you're right. It probably has moved on to actual learning goals, but we'll have to definitely look into that for sure. I'd be curious.
I will too. Like I said, I just saw a little snippet of it and I thought, oh my goodness, I saw that at the Explorer Fair. So I just thought with this conversation, maybe somebody knew something, because I know we have some teachers that are already using it, but maybe it is behavior skills. And I was thinking it was like, oh, I could teach something through this.
Yeah. Did they have a booth there, or were there Valverde teachers that were?
It was a Valverde teacher. And that's why I kind of was like, especially now with all this distance learning, you know, if we can find a way to engage them online, I just, you know, wanted to see if anybody had any knowledge.
If you want to, Bertha, if you want to explore it, and anybody here, if you guys want to explore it and maybe pilot something, we're always very open to piloting and seeing how it works out, because from there we can really just see if it's something that we want to purchase or even look at, you know, in the like the grander scheme of things. But it's always great to start, you know, from a small little group and really doing it justice. So if any of you want to look into it and are interested, talk to us.
Yeah, I'll look into it, see if it's something that's worthwhile. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions or comments you'd like to share? Suggestions?
Just sharing something that I've used in the classroom. I participated in the math mindset camp last year, and it was really, really cool to see how to incorporate mindfulness in the classroom. And the biggest takeaway for me that I would recommend for any teacher would be the teaching automatic negative thoughts, and they call them AMPs. I don't know if anyone's already familiar with that, but there's just been research that when we go through something upsetting or something that angers us or frustrates us, we get automatic negative thoughts, you know, adults, kids, anybody. And these are things such as telling us we can't do it, or, there's that fortune teller aunt that tells us the future. They're trying to predict what's going to happen. But in reality, all we really know is what's in the now. So I love the book that came with it. And I'm just trying to look it up right now so I can link it for you guys. And it was a children's book that walked the students through all the sorts of different ants that we get and just kind of like how to battle them. So
cool.
I'll look for the book and I'll share it in the chat, but I just wanted to share that out, brief explanation of it. It's really, really, really cool.
Thank you for sharing that. That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely ants all the time about myself.
Right.
All right. Anything else, ladies? No? Okay. You will have a break until we'll reconvene at 2:30. Is there anything that you'd like to share, Adriana, before we peace out?
No, I'm just thinking, do you guys want to wait until 2:30 or maybe like a 15-minute break and then come back? It's up to you guys. Let's give, if we want to just do about 15 minutes, give us a thumbs up.
Couple people.
Okay.
15.
All right. Then that way, we just, get a physiological, biological break and then come back and then just kill it.
The only thing I worry about by not starting at 2:30 is just that
if somebody else is
somebody
joining
else
in.
that hasn't been joining.
Got it.
I don't know, but
No,
it
that's
seems
true.
like we've been sticking with the same crew for the most part, so maybe we're safe.
It's up to you guys. I'm just thinking, I know that it probably will, 15 minutes makes no big difference.
And plus it's recorded. It's recorded, sure. So they can always watch the first 15 minutes. Okay, sounds like a plan. So reconvene at 2:05?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, we'll see you guys then.